My name is Katie Plunkett. I'm an educator. I am currently working full time as a fifth grade teacher. And in my off hours, I online like to write a lot about child development and communication strategies. I have a Substack and also an Instagram where I post, and that's called Kid Talk.
Obsessed with death. Katie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You said you teach fifth grade.
I do.
Fifth
Mhm.
grade was my favorite year, I think, of school altogether. I couldn't tell you the names of any teacher I had in high school. I remember nothing. I still remember my fifth grade teacher. His name was Mr. Polikoff, and he like changed my life. Greatest teacher I ever had. The guy has just been melted into my brain. So that's very exciting. Fifth grade was the best.
Fifth grade is the best. I work in a school. It's kind of interesting. It's a Waldorf school. So we track with our students. So I picked them up in first grade and now fifth grade. It's my favorite so far.
Yeah.
Also just seeing like how far they've come since first grade. Like they have the same group of kids, but curricularly, fifth grade is just tons of fun. There's a lot of like ancient history, and they're also at an age where they can have deeper conversations and more nuanced understanding of complex things. And it's been really cool this year to see that growth.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like you still don't really take yourself too serious. Like you're still a kid in fifth grade. I don't know. I feel like the brain is just at a really great point where you're like still a silly kid, but you start like figuring out like what interests you and like you get like subjects in school just, sort of start clicking. And I don't know. I loved fifth grade. All right. So it's so great to have you on. I found you on the internet, as I do most of the people that I have on this podcast. You had a post about how to talk to kids about death. And that's what we talk about here. Not specifically with children, but death is the conversation. We haven't really ever done an episode specific to talking about children about death. I think it's really important. The conversation has definitely come up on the show where we talk about the importance of obviously just talking about death in general, but also I think the younger, the better in the sense of just getting used to having harder conversations. I think there's a lot of value in that. Before we get to that, though, I am always curious, just with everyone that I'm talking with, what their relationship with death is like. So, you specifically, do you think about death a lot? Is it something you're worried about? What do you feel like your relationship with death is right now?
Good question. It's definitely shifted over the past few years. I recently, so it was 2 years ago now, and it was in March. I lost my dad, and he had ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and it happened very quickly. But there also was this year and a half long anticipatory grief that I experienced with him still being there, but like watching the decline. And I had so many conversations with my family about preparing for death and what that would look like and what would happen after. And I think my relationship before then, it wasn't really something that I thought about. I mean, I obviously understood that death is a universal experience and everybody will go through it, but it had never really hit that close to home before. I had lost grandparents, but when you're younger, I don't know. I really wish that I had had people that talked with me more about it. I didn't really think that deeply about it until a couple years ago, and I'm 32 now. I wish that I had some of those conversations younger. I just feel like I would have handled that and gotten through it more. But now it's something I think about a lot, and how death, it is an ending, but it's also like a beginning in a lot of ways, and just kind of the circular nature of life. And yeah, I think about it a lot now. And I think death can be more than just like people. It's also experiences and chapters of your life. And it's it's a really fascinating subject.
Yeah, I totally understand that like desire to have conversations earlier. I think that, I was very lucky and I didn't really experience a lot of grief and death until much later in my life. I think having these conversations, doing this podcast, talking to all these different people, it definitely helped me when I did start to lose people, just because it was so familiar, just like the thoughts and the feelings of just having conversations really do it talking helps. I think, as simple as that is, just talking about stuff really does help. And especially when it comes to something as difficult as, losing somebody like your father.
For sure. And that's like what I do on my page mostly. It's called Kid Talk. It's how do we talk to kids about these hard things?
Yeah,
Um, and I will just, before we dive deeper, I'll kind of preface everything I'm saying with I'm not a therapist, I'm not a
sure.
psychologist, definitely not a replacement for any formal support structure, but I do have a lot of experience working with kids throughout my 10 years as a teacher. I've had a lot of conversations with kids of different ages about this subject, whether they've lost a parent or grandparent. And also, I just have like a special interest in child development as well and spend a lot of time like researching it. So I think I'm kind of uniquely positioned to sort of talk about this, but very much from a human perspective, not from, a medical professional or anything like that.
This can be a serious podcast at times, but this is very much, as silly as it might sound, this is supposed to be fun. I know we're
Yeah.
talking about death and teaching children about death, but that's sort of the point, right? Is like it doesn't have to be super scary. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be uncomfortable. Maybe fun's the wrong word, but the point is, yeah, we're just this is why you should have these conversations, is you sort of understand that it's not as scary and serious as you think it is. And
Mhm.
death could be uncomfortable. It's I've definitely made people uncomfortable in my life with being too comfortable with talking about this at times. But sort of going off of that point, I'm curious to get your opinion. There's a few different things that I really want to touch on in this conversation. Obviously, the idea is having conversations with children around death. And one of the great things in the post that I saw that you shared online was that you sort of broke it down into age groups, which I think is important, right? Like, I think a younger child, someone in kindergarten, I don't think really needs to get all of the details. I think there's like a better way, maybe, of putting it. But I'm curious to get your opinion on that. Again, sort of breaking it down in these age groups, and also just like I feel like adults sort of avoid it to a certain point. And like I said, you had these age groups starting very young. So it was like there's really in the way that you kind of broke it down, there's no avoiding it. Like you're talking about it basically as soon as you really feel like they could comprehend it. So I'm just sort of curious to get your opinion on maybe why adults shouldn't be avoiding it, even if it is, uncomfortable. I think adults sort of go to like this default setting of like softening or like avoiding the truth. And maybe that's okay, but do you feel like that maybe sort of does something to the trust that the child has, or maybe like the safety of having hard conversations?
Yeah, for sure. I think that adults struggle to talk about death, not because they don't care, but because we care so much and we don't want to mess it up. I think also it's not just about the child, it's about us too. When we're talking to kids about death, oftentimes we're at the same time managing our own grief, and it's hard to guide someone else through something that we are also still processing.
Yeah.
Our instincts, especially as, parents and caregivers, is don't say too much, keep it light, like, because we want to protect them. And we don't usually have a script. I know I was never taught explicitly like what to say to somebody when they lose a loved one other than I'm sorry. But kids have questions. Kids are curious. And I think a lot of times we worry about getting it wrong and worry that we'll say something that causes more confusion or fear. And then there's also the cultural piece where in a lot of homes and families and cultures, death is hidden or softened or avoided altogether. I think there's a lot of reasons why people struggle to talk about it, but I think ultimately it is important. They don't kids don't need really at any age every single detail, but they do need truth. And I think if they're asking the questions, then they're ready to hear about it. And I do think that there's a difference between protection and preparation. Overshielding can definitely backfire. Kids can sense when something is wrong. And if they're not given clear information, they're often going to fill in gaps on their own, whether that be doing their own research or making assumptions or just putting pieces together in a way that is not accurate or correct. And vague language too, things like, oh, they went to sleep forever, or we lost them, is confusing and can create anxiety. I remember as a child hearing, oh, death is just like going to sleep forever. And I remember for like a week solid, I didn't want to go to sleep because it's
Yeah,
like, what if I wake up? um,
absolutely.
kids can be very literal, especially when they're
Yeah.
younger. So it's important to just be concrete. I remember in that post, I said that in the age band for 2 to 5, it's important to say if you're talking about a grandfather or something like, okay, grandpa died, he's not coming back. This is what happened. And some people commented and said, that's so harsh. Why would you say it like that? It's like because that's what happened.
Yeah, you're literally just telling them the truth, which is so interesting that
Yeah,
people's reaction to you telling the truth is, why would you do that?
right.
Yeah.
And I,
But
I get that you don't want them to experience any hardship, but the reality is that this is a part of life. When you talk about death, it also invites conversations about life, which are really necessary and often beautiful and healing. I mean, research shows that kids cope better when they have honest, simple, truthful explanations and opportunities to ask questions and inclusion in rituals, whatever that means for a family or culture.
yeah, I mean, I remember being a kid and going to an open casket funeral, and I don't think they even explained any. I mean, I don't remember. I'd be so curious to talk to my parents about it now, what they remember. But I don't even think I knew I was at a funeral. Like I just was like there because I don't know, I guess I couldn't be left at home. So it was like they had to go to the funeral, so I was just there. And I remember being so confused by the entire situation and the idea of like seeing an open casket is I could picture it and I could close my eyes and picture it right now. Like it's stuck with me for my entire life. And I think that there would have definitely been some value in maybe explaining what I was looking at, where we were, what had happened. You know, it was just, and I'm sure my parents just were dealing with their own grief and didn't really think, you know, this is the 90s. They were maybe just like not thinking it was totally necessary to even tell me what was going on. And I get it, you know, going back to people being confused or questioning why you would quote unquote be so harsh with you know the reality. But again, it kind of goes back to what you're saying, where it's like, well, kids are so literal and there are all of these like they went to sleep, they passed away. It's like it's just it's not enough. You know, you really have to be sort of direct and at least so that they're not confused or questioning, you know, what exactly happened.
For sure. And that's where like the honesty and simplicity have to like come together. I think that there's two ends of the spectrum. There's just over shielding and like using all of the euphemisms, and then there's the other end where they ask a question and then you dive into every single detail, including the questions that they didn't ask. And you might be anticipating those questions and they might come up. And if they do, then you can answer them. But I think sometimes when people get nervous, there's a tendency to either shut down and not want to talk about it at all, or to just kind of word vomit and say too
Yeah.
much. And that can also scare kids. But I mean, you can't just avoid the conversation altogether because silence feels scarier than the truth. And just inviting them to ask questions like, does that answer your question? If you want to talk about this more, we can. You can always bring it up. And And that's something too that people have mentioned. It's like, well, they keep repeating the same question over and over again. It's like, yes, because they're developing their understanding and understanding of something as permanent and final as death requires you to grow up and understand that and like see how cycles come and it just comes with the age. And so sometimes these same questions will repeat and it's not because they're trying to be annoying or they don't get it. They're trying to make sense of it.
I feel like I wouldn't know, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on how you sort of deal with like the evolving mind of a child when it comes to death, right? Because when they're younger, yeah, you can sort of get away with phrasing in a certain way, but then once they sort of really figure it out, I think that that's like a whole different conversation.
Yeah, so like we said, early childhood, they're very literal. So it's important to be honest because if you say, "Oh, we lost them," they'll be like, "Okay, well, where are they? Like, let's go find them," you
Yeah,
know?
right. Yeah.
Um, in the mind of a child who is young and hasn't seen the cycle of death happening, it's seen as almost like temporary or reversible. And they might think like, okay, well, they died and they're coming back next week. Or kind of like a magical thinking, like, oh, well, is it because I thought this and that's why this happened? And I think that's why at that younger age, even though it may sound harsh, you have to be just very literal. Like they died, they are not coming back. If a death doesn't occur, like so that you can have this conversation, I think it's good to have the conversation anyway, and you can do that through stories. Picture books are really powerful for this purpose. I have a Substack article with a list of just recommendations of my favorite ones that I've shared with my students in the past that I'm happy to send your way as well.
Yeah.
Um, I think when kids get a little bit older, there's a little bit more space for nuance. I think that clarity is still very important, but they start to understand the finality of death, but they may not understand that this is a universal experience. They might think that it does happen, but it's not going to happen to them. It's not going to happen to their family. I think stories are another really great way to talk to younger kids in that 5 to 7 age range about it. I think that this is when they're old enough to start really kind of expressing emotion, not just through like speaking, but also through art. That's a really good way to process feelings that they might be having about that. I think from age 7 to 10, that's when the finality and the universality really sinks in, understanding that death is permanent, everyone will die, and also that this is a biological reality we cannot escape from. The body one day is going to stop working. This happens with everything in our natural world. And then as they're getting older, more abstract thinking is emerging. They're starting to ask questions about, like, well, why did this happen? And this isn't fair. And why does this person get sick and this person doesn't? And they may have questions about spirituality or faith and also just fearing future loss as well. I remember being 11 years old and I don't remember what the conversation was, but I was at a sleepover and it came up. We were talking about death and what happens after we die and where do we go. And we were outside, we were sleeping in my friend's backyard, and I remember just laying there all night looking up at the stars, just like, oh my God. Like having this almost like moment of realizing that I am a
Yeah.
mortal human. And I think that a lot of children have a moment like that. I think some of them can move through it if they've had a lot of conversations leading up to it. But for other kids, like myself included, I almost had this like little existential crisis in the middle of the night in my friend's backyard. I'm like,
It's so
you
funny
know,
you say that because there, I stopped asking it because a lot of people didn't remember. But another question I was asking everybody at the beginning of these episodes was, do you remember the moment you realized that you were going to die one day? And most people don't remember that exact moment. It's so interesting that it's literally like you have that exact moment. I have the exact moment too, and it's what sort of had me start asking other people. But, and obviously, this is a very small percentage of people, but most people I ask don't really remember. Maybe if they took some time to think about it, if it would be different. But yeah, most people, it seems like, I don't know, maybe they just it is so traumatic that like eventually their brain just sort of just like erases it from their memory. But yeah, I had the same thing as you where it was like there was this moment where it just clicked like, oh man, I'm gonna die one day and then that's it. It's just nothing forever. And I was in school when it happened. And yeah, I just remember like walking through the halls of school and it was just like everything was silent around me. It was just this, yeah, this really scary moment. Uh, Yours sounds much more peaceful. Being in the backyard, being able to look up at the sky sounds nice, but also kind of scary too. But yeah,
It
that's so
was nice,
interesting.
but it also, I started having this kind of like final destination type thinking where I'm like, oh my God, like that
Yeah.
telephone pole is gonna fall and set everything on fire and this could
Oh
happen.
no.
You know?
Yeah, yeah,
And then I'm
yeah.
like, wait, did my heart start beating weird? Is something like,
Oh my gosh.
that kind
Total. Yeah. I still have everything you just described has happened to me as a 30 something adult. So I get it.
of. Mhm.
Yeah. It's, man, that's so interesting. Um, I feel like I cut you off though. Was there more to that, or you were going through the age? Did we hit like there's still a little bit older age range, right? That you had mentioned in your post there. Sorry,
Yeah,
I
that's
got
no. That pretty much covers it. I think like
yeah,
beyond age 10, kids do have the ability to think more abstractly and they're going to have more of those kind of like big why questions.
yeah,
And I think it's important for parents or caregivers or whoever is talking to a child about this to remember that you do not need to have all the answers. These are not answers that humans have. It's just, this is one of those things. It's part of life. And
yeah.
it's okay for you to say, I don't know. This is just what happens. And that's perfectly fine. I think with older kids, I mean, it can be younger kids too, but I think this is especially helpful for children who are kind of like the middle grades and older to be a part of building rituals and find ways to like honor memories. I think that that shifts the conversation more from fear of loss to moving through it and how can we celebrate life and this beautiful cycle has like come to completion. But focusing on like the big picture that is that cycle, not just on the moment that it ended.
You mentioned, obviously different tools, and it's seen, and one of them being, books and stories, which I think is a great tool, right? If you could sort of show them something physical, they could read, they could watch or listen to, whether it's you just reading a book to them or whatever it is. Obviously that, I've seen children's books that sort of explain death in a very like simple, uh, less scary sort of way, which I think is great. And I'm curious to get your opinion on other tools for grief, specifically for kids. There's another episode that's going to come out after yours where I spoke to somebody who interviewed this gentleman who created this AI grief bot. And I don't know how much you're aware of this sort of stuff, but I mean, Amazon and Meta and Microsoft, all these big companies are really heavily investing in AI grief tools. And their quote unquote goal is to eliminate grief. And the idea is through these AI apps. This app was created to where it looks like you're on FaceTime with whoever. It literally just looks like FaceTime on your phone, but it's your grandma who passed away 3 years ago, and you're still having conversations with that person. I mean, I'm curious what you and of course, whatever you're comfortable discussing or what you feel like you can actually give a response to. But I would think, and this is something that came up a little bit in our conversation, that especially for like a young developing mind, I don't think it's great for them to be on the phone with their dead grandma. I mean, did I just completely terrify you with AI grief bots or what?
Kind of. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna lie. I
yeah.
haven't heard about that, but
It's crazy.
oh,
I mean, she interviewed the guy who created the chatbot, and then she interviewed the chatbot, like had a conversation with it. And the first chatbot that he created for this app was his dead mom. Like that's how It's a crazy episode. It's come if you're listening to this, it's coming out soon. So get ready for
Can't
that
wait
one.
to listen to that. That's
But
fascinating.
it's wild. It's my friend Charlie. She writes for the Atlantic. She does incredible work. I'll send you some of her articles. She's a
Yeah.
genius.
I think my knee-jerk reaction is, am I allowed to swear on?
You could say whatever the fuck you want, Katie.
Okay, my knee-jerk reaction is just like, what the fuck? Like,
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I don't see that being beneficial long term.
Yeah.
I think that there's a few layers to this. First of all, I think that it would be very confusing, especially for young children,
Yeah.
to see somebody that they've been told is dead, but then is not on a screen. I think that would just lead to more questions and confusion and distrust in general of the grown-ups that are helping to facilitate that. It is important when talking about death to recognize like the permanence of it and that it is the completion of a life cycle. And I think that it almost removes those conversations about the life that they lived and the impact that they had if they then will have the ability to keep talking with that person and creating more memories that aren't actually with the real person. I don't know. I could just see it almost sort of, what's the right word? Maybe it kind of just,
Dystopian, terrifying,
yeah, it kind of tears
unnatural.
at like, yeah, it tears at the memory of the person. It doesn't
Yeah.
feel natural. And yeah, I don't like it.
I don't like it either.
Like I
Yeah.
understand why somebody would be tempted to do that. I mean, even for myself, when my dad, because ALS part of it is the bulbar piece where they lose the ability to, form words and swallow. And so as his voice started to kind of decline, we did voice banking just through Apple,
Yeah.
and it was able to create kind of like an AI voice for him. And the purpose of that was that so we could plug it into his eye gaze software and he could talk as himself.
Wow.
And it was really cool.
Yes, I think stuff like that that's a much better use of technology.
Yeah. So I see it for that, but
Yeah.
the I don't know, a replacement so that you don't have to experience grief and you can pretend this person is still alive doesn't seem natural or healthy to me at all.
Yeah, and they try and like spin it as like, oh, well, there's certain generations that have just grown up with the internet, which is obviously true. It's like all you know is like this technology in this world and it keeps getting better. And it's like, well, why wouldn't you want to just live in a world where you could just always have a relationship with this person? They don't
Mhm.
have to go away. And you're like, that's sort of the point of the whole thing is like
Yeah.
part of living life is the fact that you only got so much time and that you do die. And I don't know. I think it gets complicated. But if things, I don't know, I think you could regulate stuff and come up with some interesting tools.
Mhm.
People obviously watch videos of relatives that have passed away, and I don't want this to be an AI conversation because that's not what this is about. But I think that people listen to voicemails of people that have passed away. Like it's not unheard of that you're going to want to see and hear a person who's died. I just think that they shouldn't be aware of like what movie comes out on Friday night because they're dead. You know.
Mm. Right.
Anyway, I did want to talk a little bit about, we're sort of there, right? Is, different tools for children to process loss. And we sort of talked about it. Obviously there's a bunch of different ways besides just talking to them about it. I think, like we said, like different children's books is a great tool for them to sort of get a story. Besides like the obvious of just like sitting down and talking. I mean, is there anything that you would recommend to people listening that maybe they could use, especially with like a kid that maybe is struggling or maybe not wanting to have that conversation?
So that younger age band, stories is one tool. I love it. I think part of it is that I'm a teacher and I just like use stories all the time.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think that stories can be a good conversation starter. But also, I think that this goes for all kids, but particularly like the littles. Just repeating the same simple script is enough. Like you don't have to dive into those details. You can just say, Grandpa died. His body stopped working. No, he's not coming back. And they might ask you repeatedly, like we talked about before, but just repeat that, and that's fine. I think it's important to keep routines steady. Kids really feel more regulated and secure when they have that consistency. And especially if the loss is somebody that was a part of their daily routine, I think it's super critical to keep all other pieces of the routine steady during that time. And just offering closeness as well. They may reject it, they may not want that, but just even being in the same room, letting them know okay, like you want your space. That's totally fine. I'll be right here. So they know that you are there and they can come to you if needed. And then play as well is really important, just like open-ended creative play. And a lot of times with the littles, it will come out in play. They might act something out. You just might notice that they're using tools a certain way. They're kind of experimenting, trying to understand death through the play. And then for kids who are a little bit older, I still think it's important to repeat the script, but they're going to have more questions and small chunks. You can just give them exactly what they ask for. You don't have to go deeper. If they are wondering, they will ask you. And just really reassure safety and like lack of blame. There's nothing that you did to cause this. Kids at that age are not really understanding that their inner world, even though it affects their own actions, their inner world in their mind is not having an effect that big on someone else. And they don't quite recognize that yet. And so it's important to say, nothing you did caused this. When kids get a little older than that, so like eight to 10, I think that's when the creative expression piece really comes into play. You can sit down at a table with them and you don't have to bring anything up. We can just draw something. Like what are you thinking about today? A lot of times it'll come up organically. It might just be a tool for them to then start opening up. You can ask questions about what you're seeing. The memory rituals become more important. Incorporate them. Like how do we want to honor this person? Like what ideas do you have? And also just like movement, body regulation. Sometimes, I mean, I think this goes for adults too, but kids may not really be able to articulate how they're feeling, but they definitely have some like pent up feelings about it, whatever stage of grief that they're in. And just moving the body, getting out of the house, going on walks can be really good for that, just mental health and health in general. But also, it gives you an opportunity to connect with them and at the same time offer that closeness and potentially engage in a conversation. For kids that are like teenagers, like 11 plus, really just validate their feelings. They might be complex. You may not understand them. They may not want to share them. That's okay. You can even say literally that. It's okay if you don't want to talk about this right now. I'm right here if you want to. You can kind of help coordinate closeness a little bit. They might come to you, they may not want that. You can, check in with friends. You can let the school know this happened. Just, check in with them, keep an eye on them, and just kind of watch for certain behaviors like isolation, digital exposure, respect their privacy and independence, but you don't want to go too far the other extreme where, there's not the supervision because, especially if this is a death that had like a really big impact on them and you know it, but they're not showing it. Like it can be concerning. And you want to make sure that, they're being supported. It's hard to do that if they're behind a closed door, like on a screen. I know I kind of just laundry listed a lot of things.
No, it's all great stuff. I mean, just even just the the idea of going for a walk, like you mentioned. I mean, I think that's great. Yeah, for kids to be physical, to get out, to go do something. I
Mhm.
mean, it sounds so simple, but the idea of going on a walk seems simple, but can help so much. I'm as an adult now. I mean, if I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed, the best thing I or the best results I get from trying to like de-stress is always from just going for a walk. You really can't beat it. Like, leave and don't look at your phone. Like, go on a walk and leave your phone at home, or at least just like keep it in your pocket. But go out.
Yeah.
I think going outside. I'm even against, and this might be, really just wild, but I'm against headphones. I think when you go for a walk, it should just be for the walk. No
Yeah.
music, nothing. It's just you and your thoughts for what, even 20 minutes. Like, just don't look at a screen and just, I don't know, be aware of whatever's around you for a little bit.
I think that there's levels. I mean, there's a spectrum of grief too, right? Like there's some people might be able to, and this goes for kids too, to kind of get to that acceptance place faster than others. But there is no timeline for this kind of stuff. And I mean, I know I'm sure you know, like the five stages of grief, like it's not linear, like you're gonna
Sure.
bounce all over the place. It's the same for
Yeah.
kids. And just really providing that steady support, like trying out different things. You don't need to smother them, but just the consistent, like clear language, keep the routines, ask questions. If they're really struggling, like it's ongoing, or they're not able to like do everyday kind of functional things. Just increase the check-ins, check in with the school, maybe think about like a grief group or some other sort of expressive outlet like art therapy or support circle. And then, of course, there's always professional support too. There's therapists and counselors, pediatricians, all of whom can, offer more kind of serious interventions in the event that that's needed. But I think having, a toolbox with strategies at the ready is really helpful. Just because you never know, like even if death isn't something that's affecting your child or your family now, it is a possibility always for everyone. And you just don't know like when or why or how, but I personally just feel like it's good to be proactive and have conversations about the theme of loss even before it happens.
All right. So this is the real question, right? Is that if we get better at talking to kids about death early on, how do you think that shapes the kind of adults that they become or their relationships with, loss and just like the fear of losing someone?
That's such a good question. I think that these conversations will help them move through it. I don't want to say easier because they still, at some point in their life, will have to move through it and it will be hard.
Yeah.
And also, they will have the ability to support themselves in the process better if they have coping skills and know that there are certain supports in place. I think obviously by the time we're adults, we understand that death is very final and permanent and it can be scary. And, you know, I'm somebody who has experienced a big loss recently and I talk to kids about this stuff and I still have, intrusive thoughts about very Final Destination-esque type
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Um, and also, it is helpful to know, that I can reach out to people. I'm not alone in this. This is a universal thing. All of us, I mean, it's a very human thing to worry about death. It's inevitable. And also it's natural and normal and it's a part of life. And like that's the focus is that life is beautiful and this is the culmination of the cycle. And when you're going through grief, there is there is like a light at the end of the tunnel. Like it's not that the grief completely goes away, it's that you will continue living and you will learn how to carry this and you will be okay. My dad actually, this was years and years ago, but when my grandma died, I remember talking to him about it and the way he framed it because I was really sad about the loss of my grandma, but I knew that my grandma was his mom, and I just couldn't possibly imagine like losing a parent at that point in my life and how devastating that would be. And I asked him how he was able to carry it. I was probably like 13 or I don't know, something like that. And he said, basically, it's like when you're born, you have a sheet of paper and there's no holes in the paper. It's just blank. And then throughout your life, you're drawing on the paper, but occasionally somebody's going to come in and punch a hole out of it. And that hole's gone. Like that piece of paper is gone. You're never getting it back. And for a while, that's all you're going to see. And you're going to focus on it. And you're going to be mad about it. And you're going to bargain and all of those stages of grief. But eventually, you're going to continue your art. And over time, you're not going to notice that little hole anymore. You're going to notice all of the other beautiful things on the page. And when he passed, I really thought about that a lot. It was like somebody took a punch and did it right in the center, but there still is all this beauty on other parts of the paper. And now that I'm 2 years out from it, I see that more now, but it did take time. And I had to remind myself of that a lot, like over the past 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, what a great way to sort of explain just in the sense of this whole episode, right? We're like talking about how you sort of explain death and grief to a child, and I feel like your dad nailed it. You came
Mhm.
up to him and probably threw him a curveball at 13, and that's wonderful. I love that. I'm so sorry about your dad. It's really unfortunate. Like you said, it's 2 years now. What was your
Mhm.
dad's name?
Jerry.
Jerry. Such a dad name. I love
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Jerry. Well, Jerry, you nailed it, man. I mean, what a great, I mean, that's going in my back pocket, I think, forever now. I mean, what a great way to sort of explain life and grief.
Mhm.
Jerry's got it figured out. Good for him, man. Well, I didn't keep track of how long we've been going. It's got to be close to an hour. I don't want to keep you for too long. You're literally doing this in a classroom right now at school. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm very excited to continue to follow you online. I followed the Substack before we got started today. All of the information for your Substack and your Instagram for people to go to get all this information are included in the show notes for this episode. So if you're listening, go find that. Of course, we'll post stuff online as well. But Katie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.